The smell of well-cooked meals drifted through the air inside the Quincy Room, a fancy restaurant right in the middle of downtown Chicago. The chatter of people mixing with the gentle sound of glasses clinking gave the place a lively energy that always made the evenings feel special. Moving smoothly through the maze of tables, Emma, a young waitress with thoughtful eyes, balanced plates and drinks with practiced skill. She flashed a polite but quiet smile at guests, careful not to let anyone see just how distracted she really was. Beneath her plain white shirt and black apron, Emma hid a side of herself that hardly anyone at the Quincy Room had ever noticed. Each time she passed the grand piano resting in the corner, she felt a nudge inside her, a reminder of a life she had always imagined for herself but could never reach. That piano was more than just a part of the restaurant's decor. It stood for years of music lessons, afternoons spent dreaming at the keys, and the big hopes she quietly carried. But the cycle of rent, bills, and double shifts kept that dream out of reach most nights. Still, as she worked, a small piece of her always drifted back to the music she missed so much. That evening, the mood in the Quincy Room shifted suddenly as soon as David Kramer walked through the door. Everyone recognized him right away, a successful real estate investor with a reputation for being difficult and for turning even the simplest dinner into a show. The staff stiffened up, trading cautious glances, and the conversations among the guests dropped to a low hum. People at the nearby tables managed polite, strained smiles, fully aware that David liked to push people just to see how they would react. David took his usual place at a large table right in the center of the dining room, surrounded by a group of friends and business associates who hung on his every word. You could tell by the swagger in his step and the loud way he ordered his first drink that he assumed he was the most important person in the room. Waiters rushed to keep his table flawless, hoping to avoid his sharp remarks. But tonight, as David scanned the staff, his focus stopped on Emma. There was a flicker in his eyes, a kind of sharp curiosity and challenge that made her pulse quicken. Emma felt his stare, knew the familiar feeling of being put on the spot, and sensed that this dinner would be anything but ordinary. Emma kept her cool as she approached David's table, not letting her nerves show while she scribbled down drink orders and tried to focus on her work. But as the minutes ticked by, David's remarks grew harder to ignore. He made teasing comments and sly jokes at her expense, laughing with his friends as though she were part of the entertainment for the evening. With each innocent question or knowing glance, Emma felt a knot tightening in her chest. It was clear he wasn't just here for dinner. He wanted to see how far he could push her with his games. Even so, Emma remembered what her mom used to say back home in Oak Park: never let anyone make you feel small. She clung to that advice, standing just a little straighter each time David tried to make her uncomfortable. She gave short, polite answers and never let her smile slip. Still, the restaurant, which usually felt cozy and bustling, suddenly seemed too bright, too open, like some kind of stage where everyone could see every awkward moment. She felt exposed, the center of attention in a role she never asked for, just trying to get through the night with her dignity intact. As Emma poured a glass of red wine for David, he leaned back in his chair and watched her closely. Then, clear enough for half the dining room to hear, he asked, "So, what do you do when you're not carrying trays around?" His voice sounded playful, but the edge in it made the question feel like a dare. Immediately, forks paused mid-air and quiet settled over the nearby tables, as people tilted their heads, interested in how Emma would respond. Emma froze for just a heartbeat, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. She could have brushed off the question or told David it was none of his business, but instead she decided there was no shame in who she was. "I play piano sometimes," she answered quietly but clearly, refusing to shrink away. David's face lit up, a slow, satisfied grin spreading across his face. The answer was exactly what he'd been hoping for, fuel for whatever stunt he had planned next. Emma could feel eyes on her from different corners of the restaurant. She stood a little taller, knowing that even if David was trying to make her uncomfortable, she at least had been honest. Still, she wondered what he would do now that he had that little piece of her story to play with. David, never one for subtlety, suddenly raised his glass and called out in a loud, playful voice, "Why don't you play something for us, Emma? Let's see those piano skills." His friends snickered behind their napkins, making it clear that they expected some awkward entertainment. The invitation wasn't kind, it was another one of David's games, and almost everyone recognized it. A hush fell over the restaurant, far deeper than before. Even the kitchen seemed to quiet down. Emma felt every eye on her as her mind raced. She wasn't sure if she should accept or refuse. David's challenge hung in the air, and she could sense that, whatever she chose, people would remember this moment. Her fear of making a mistake, of being laughed at, wrestled with a growing urge to stand her ground and not let David control what happened next. Emma's heart pounded in her ears, and her hands felt cold even as she gripped the tray tightly. There was a stubborn part of her that didn't want to give in, but another part whispered that maybe this was her one chance to truly be seen for who she was, not just as some waitress. The whole room seemed to wait for her choice. For a second, Emma really thought about saying no, just turning away and pretending she did not care about David's taunt. But then he leaned forward, voice loud and dripping with sarcasm, and said, "Maybe you just talk a big game. Maybe you don't have any real talent." The words bothered her more than she expected. They reminded her of every doubt she ever had, but also pushed her toward anger that burned quietly just under her skin. She remembered all those nights growing up in Oak Park, playing their old upright piano after her shift at the grocery store. No one ever clapped or watched. Most evenings it was just her and her hands in the half-dark. She would try the same song again and again until she got it right because she truly loved the music, not because anyone cared. In that memory, she found something strong to hold on to. So instead of shrinking back, she straightened up and took a deep breath. Meeting David's eyes, she nodded once, letting him, and everyone else, know she accepted. Carefully, she put her tray down on a nearby table and wiped her sweaty palms on her apron. Then, heart-thumping but feeling strangely calm, she walked across the floor toward the black grand piano at the room's edge, every step watched by an audience that now seemed willing to listen. As Emma made her way across the polished wood floor, the walk felt much longer than it really was. Every step seemed to echo in the quiet that now filled the Quincy room. She could sense people leaning forward in their seats, watching without saying a word. The usual buzz of conversation and laughter had disappeared, replaced by that thick, silent air people bring to something they expect to go badly. She tried not to look back toward David and his table, but part of her could still feel his smug grin and the way his friends were probably sharing bets about what would happen next. She slipped onto the piano bench and let her fingers hover over the keys. Just for a moment, she shut her eyes and tried to block out the restaurant, the customers, even the strong overhead lights. Memories flashed by, her mom humming from another room, the old lamp on top of the piano back home, the small moments when playing made her forget everything else. She breathed in slow and deep, searching for some of that peace now. The keys felt cold and smooth as always under her hands, but everything else about this night was different. Still, this was her chance, and she was done hiding. At first, Emma's fingers moved uncertainly across the keys, and the opening notes came out soft, almost shaky. Someone in the back coughed, and she could hear a few scattered whispers, the sort of sounds people make when they are just waiting for something to go wrong. A couple of diners even shot each other quick glances, maybe nudging or smirking the way David wanted, still expecting this to turn into a joke for the whole room. But as Emma kept playing, the song started to grow. She dug deep for the comfort she found at home and let herself remember all the hours she had spent learning this tune by heart. The room seemed to shrink back as her hands found their confidence. Each chord came out clearer, smoother, her own story slipping out into the open. This was not about showing off or winning against David anymore. This was a chance to share a part of herself that hardly anybody at the restaurant ever saw. The music filled every corner, and the mood in the place shifted. Even the people who had looked away before were now turning to listen. There was something honest about her playing. Every note seemed to carry a piece of her hope and all the tough moments she had lived through. Emma lost herself in the melody and finally let it all go, just focusing on the music. As Emma played on, a calm took over the restaurant that no one had expected. Even the regulars who never seemed to pay attention to anything stopped talking and just listened. You could tell it was not just about the skill. Her playing reached people in a way that went beyond talent. It was quiet in the kind of way that felt important, like everyone was holding their breath for something meaningful. Almost everyone, even the ones who had been ready to laugh, found themselves caught up in it. There were diners who watched with their forks resting on their plates, and even a few of the waitstaff paused in the middle of their shifts, touched by how Emma turned a simple song into something bigger. For those minutes, time seemed to slow down. People forgot about their conversations, their cell phones, and even their food. The only thing that really mattered was the way her music filled every corner of the Quincy room. David, who had started the whole thing with a smirk and a lazy confidence, was also changing. The smirk faded as he watched her play. It was new for him, almost feeling exposed as he realized he was moved by her music, even if he never would have admitted it out loud. When Emma finally reached the last note, the room hung in total silence, like nobody wanted to break the spell just yet. For a handful of seconds, everyone just stared at her and the glossy black piano, letting the music sink in. Then, almost as if on cue, the whole restaurant burst into applause. Chairs scraped across the floor as people stood up, clapping harder than anyone ever did for a piano performance in a Chicago diner. Some folks even whistled, others shouted out things like "Bravo" or "Way to go." Emma looked out and saw her coworkers, people she traded stories and late-shift frustrations with, grinning from ear to ear. A couple of the servers gave her a thumbs up, and even gruff old Tony from the kitchen shouted something cheerful from behind the swinging door. Standing there for a moment, Emma felt all the nerves from earlier just wash away. She did not care about why she had walked to the piano or whatever challenge David had meant her to face. Right then, she was not the waitress worrying about tips or what people thought of her. Instead, she was just someone who had managed to reach people through music, turning a tricky night into something unforgettable. The room felt warmer, and for once, she let herself enjoy it. David sat back in his chair, his clapping slow and reserved, not quite able to mask the awkward way he shifted in his seat. He had started the whole thing expecting Emma to stumble, hoping her nerves would get the best of her in front of everyone. Yet, watching the crowd cheer for her, he was the one feeling uneasy, realizing he was on the other end of all those eyes for once. Some of his friends at the table shot him questioning looks, but he just looked away, his confidence slipping as he tried to blend into the background. Meanwhile, Emma stood up from the piano bench, carefully smoothing out her apron with steady hands. She took in the applause, letting herself feel the attention, not the old kind that weighed her down with worry, but the new kind, full of real respect. Faces that, a few minutes ago, had watched with open doubt now showed only admiration. A couple of customers even nodded at her with honest smiles, acknowledging what she had done. For probably the first time in a long while, Emma felt taller, stronger even, as if every hard moment she had lived through had suddenly been worth it. It was a feeling she wanted to remember. As Emma walked back to her section, she was met with smiles and warm handshakes from customers who just wanted to tell her how much her playing meant to them. Someone squeezed her shoulder and said, "You made my night," while another diner leaned in and told her about the song reminding him of his childhood in Milwaukee. A couple even asked if she played anywhere else in Chicago, suggesting she should perform at real music spots downtown. People seemed eager to share their own little stories, grateful for the unexpected moment she had given them. Every kind word felt like a little patch, closing up wounds she carried from all the long nights running orders, the times when life just felt too heavy or when she thought she would always be stuck in the background. She could see now that it was not just about playing the right notes or not messing up, it was about connecting. Even with all the constant noise and the busy routine of the Quincy room, she had managed to show everyone a part of herself that was real. In the middle of all that hustle, Emma realized she had gained something special. It was not about tips or applause, it was the proof that who she was, at her core, had finally been seen. No one could take that from her. David, wanting to save face, tried to slip in a comment as Emma passed by. With a crooked smile, he said something like, "Guess you never know where real talent is hiding," hoping maybe he could spin things back his way or at least remind people he still had a voice in the room. But even as he said it, everyone could tell there was no real weight behind his words. His tone was off, and folks who heard just looked away or went back to their food, wanting to hang on to the good feeling instead of stirring up old games. Emma stopped and looked at David, not with anger, just with a calm steadiness. She gave a small nod and replied, "You do not have to understand it, David. This was never about proving anything to you." It was soft, but there was something solid behind it, enough for anyone nearby to pick up on. People turned their heads at her answer, sensing the finality in her voice. There was no room left for teasing or little power struggles. With just a few words, Emma managed to close the book on the tension and show she could stand on her own, no matter what anyone else thought. After all that, the vibe in the Quincy room was not quite the same as before. The place, usually a little stiff, with folks minding their manners and small talk sticking to the safe stuff, felt different now. People were smiling more freely, sharing glances across tables like they were all in on a good secret. It was as if Emma's music had broken down some of those invisible walls that always seemed to pop up between customers and staff, or even between the regulars and newcomers. The whole room seemed lighter, with a mix of admiration and real friendliness floating between people who, just earlier, probably would not have even noticed each other. David and his friends, who had been the loudest and most confident at their table, now kept pretty quiet. They stopped cracking jokes or shooting snarky looks over their shoulders. Every so often, you could see them hunched in, just picking at their plates or stirring their coffee, all that swagger gone. No one needed to call them out or rub it in, because their silence said enough. You could tell they knew they no longer controlled the mood of the evening. Everyone else just talked and laughed, not worried about impressing anyone, savoring this new, honest sense of togetherness. As the night moved on, Emma noticed a change inside herself that was hard to miss. She felt lighter, almost like a weight she did not even realize she was carrying had finally fallen away. Even her steps across the floor were more steady, and each time she laughed or chatted with someone, there was no hint of pretending, just genuine happiness. She caught her own reflection in a window and saw herself smiling back, realizing that it was the first real smile she had felt in a long time. Her coworkers, some of whom usually kept to themselves or only talked about split checks and coffee refills, gave her friendly nods or quick words as she walked by. One of the cooks, Lisa, even reached out and squeezed her hand during a lull, the kind of gesture that did not need any words. It was clear they were not just happy for her, they were proud to have watched her stand up and show everyone who she really was. The Quincy room, which used to feel full of pressure and silent rules, now felt open and welcoming. Emma felt for once like she truly belonged there, able to just be herself instead of hiding behind a uniform or a quiet voice. Later on, when it was time for tables to settle up, Emma found herself heading over to David's group with their check in hand. As she placed the bill on their table, she noticed how David hardly glanced up. Earlier in the evening, he had been the type to look people straight in the eye, cracking jokes and waiting for a reaction. Now he kept his eyes on the table, fidgeting with his wallet as if he hoped she might just walk away without a word. His whole attitude had shifted, shoulders slumped, his voice barely more than a mumble when he said thank you. The change was obvious, and Emma almost felt sorry for him, seeing how lost he was when stripped of his old confidence.
Strangely, Emma felt no urge to glow or say anything sharp.
She simply stood there, steady and calm, waiting as they counted out the cash. She realized she had nothing left to prove. Her peace came from seeing herself through, not from someone else's discomfort. For her, the night ended with a quiet confidence, a sort of inner calm that let her leave resentment behind. Staying true to who she was felt like the deeper victory, and that was enough, even without any big final word. As Emma waited for David and his friends to finish sorting out their check, something unexpected happened. One of the guys at the table, Tom, who had mostly stayed quiet all night, looked up at her with a half smile and said, "Hey, that song you played earlier was really something. Reminded me of growing up out near Cleveland," he admitted, his voice clear and genuine. He seemed almost embarrassed to be the first from their table to say anything real. Emma could tell he meant it, and it caught her off guard in a good way. For a second, it broke the tension not just between them, but even among his own group. She realized right then that even in a crowd that seemed closed off or uninterested, there might always be one person listening, really listening.
NG.
There was something hopeful about that, some reminder that the world was not divided into just friends and critics. Sometimes, empathy showed up from people you least expected. Emma gave Tom a warm smile, the kind that just came naturally, and thanked him. That small, honest moment did more than any applause could have. It helped her feel part of something much bigger than herself or even her own pain, as if music truly could open a door in anyone. By the time the shift ended and the Quincy room started to empty out, Emma finally headed to the back, where she grabbed her purse from the staff cubby and sat down for a minute to count out her tips. As she stacked up the bills and coins, she could hardly believe it. She had pulled in more tonight than she usually earned in 3 or 4 slower shifts. Folks had been generous, sliding her a few extra dollars with their checks or dropping their change into the tip jar at the piano. It felt like much more than just a pile of money. It was as if each tip was someone telling her, "You deserve this. Keep going." Emma thought about all the things this money might help with. There were bills looming for sure, but tonight the big dream felt just within reach. Maybe she could finally sign up for the piano lessons she kept postponing, the ones some part of her never quite believed she deserved. Feeling that possibility, real and close, Emma gathered her things and walked out into the cool Cleveland night. As she stepped along the sidewalk under a sky with a scattering of stars, Emma felt calm and sure. She was not only a waitress or just a daydreamer anymore, she was, at last, starting to become the artist she knew she could be. In the days that followed, word about Emma's performance made its way through the regular crowd at the Quincy room. People she barely knew would stop her to mention how the whole mood of the place had shifted for the better, all because of that one night. Some told the story in bits and pieces, How it started out with someone trying to embarrass her and ended with almost everyone rooting for her instead. It became kind of a local tale, about someone who stayed true to herself, even when it looked like the odds were against her. Emma tried to keep her routine as usual, but there was no ignoring the little thrill she felt every time a familiar customer smiled at her or asked if she would be playing again soon. She realized her story had become a small beacon for others, a piece of hope that things really can turn around. Then one afternoon, her phone buzzed with a call from a number she did not recognize. On the other end was Mark, a music producer she'd noticed lingering in the background that night. He explained how her playing had stuck in his mind and invited her to come in and record a demo. Suddenly, a future Emma had only imagined felt closer than ever before. Emma did not jump at the offer right away, but she knew deep down that passing it up would haunt her even more than the risk of failure. She was not expecting some overnight miracle just because a producer had shown some interest. Instead, she saw it as the first real door swinging open after years spent peeking through windows and wishing for something more. What happened with David still crossed her mind sometimes. It had stung at first, but the memory now felt like proof she could hold her own. The whole thing had left scars, sure, but it also left her sturdier, her belief in her music and her values far stronger than before. So on a quiet afternoon, Emma set up her phone on the coffee table and started practicing for the demo in the corner of her small Cleveland apartment. She let her fingers wander freely over the keys, the weight of old fears finally gone. The living room walls seemed to hold her soft singing without judgment. For once, she was the one deciding the story, not anyone else. There was a sense that the road ahead would not be easy, but that did not bother her anymore. She was ready to own every note and maybe even give hope to someone else sitting at their own piano, still waiting to find the courage to play.